Hey everybody, good afternoon. This is Jeff again with some horseback wisdom. I'm not near the horses. I haven't been done a video about the horses in a while. I need to get out there because the last horse video I did had a lot of views. Apparently, you guys like the horses more than you like me. So, which hey, I like horses too. I'll see if I can get a video next time, maybe this week of Lola with her 8-year-old girl scream. She's the silliest horse. Anyway. She, for those of you that don't know, whenever Lola is disrupted in her daily schedule, she screeches like an 8-year-old girl, and it's funny. It is funny, but she's the sweetest horse. Anyway, so today's video is about Psalm 90. This was a prayer of Moses, the man of God. It's funny, every culture knows about Moses. He's a prominent figure in 3 of the world's largest religions: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And he was a friend of God. If you can imagine God saying that about you, huh? So he says, Lord, through all the generations you have been our home. Before the mountains were born, before you gave birth to the earth and the world, from beginning to end, you are God. And then he goes on to say, satisfy us each morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy to the end of our lives. Give us gladness in proportion to our former misery. Replace the evil years with good. Let us, your servants, see your work again. Let our children see your glory, and may the Lord our God show us his approval. And make our efforts successful. Yes, make our efforts successful. That was Moses' prayer, written about 3,000 years ago, maybe a little bit more. So, God has been our home. And now, this was written for the Hebrew people. Moses was a Hebrew, even though he grew up as the son of Pharaoh's daughter and would have eventually probably been Pharaoh in Egypt. He forsook all of that to care for his people, the Hebrews. So even though he wrote this for the Hebrew people, he really wrote this for all mankind. This is a great saying that we can all say to God. Give us gladness in proportion to our former misery. I was thinking about that today, and just thinking about what's going on in the world. How almost every country is governed by horribly corrupt, I'm trying to think of the least pejorative term I can use. But anyway, and they're creating misery for people all over the world. Here's some examples from the U.S. So many of you know I'm a Texan, and our southern border, if it weren't for Governor Abbott, now I'm not a fan of Governor Abbott. I don't think he's conservative except on election year. But he is trying to address the border. Not sure why he hadn't called out the National Guard, but anyway. We have hundreds of thousands of people pouring across that border every week, many of which are children. And I have a friend who was a runner for a drug cartel from the time he was about 8 until he got caught at age 18 and went to prison. Got his life turned around to Jesus, and now it's productive. But, so his former misery, he would ask God, he'd say, God, give me gladness in proportion to my former misery. What he would pray for is, Lord, those years that I spent in the penitentiary, I think almost 15 years, please give me that back. That was my misery. The years I spent as a drug runner as a child, he would say, please give me that back. Not because he wanted to do that, but because the cartels would give him money. But let me just share this with you. When the world looks like it does today, and just mind you, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I have a brother who's one of the smartest people in the world. But I can fix the southern border problem in one day. I'm not sure that the method I would use would be readily received by the. It certainly wouldn't be received by Democrats, but I could fix the southern border problem in one day. I'll give you an example. Now, this wouldn't be my methodology, but I lived in a country, Turkey, and they had just declared martial law because they had a horrible drug epidemic, heroin, opium. It was destroying their country. So their government declared martial law, put the army in charge of every area, and said that the possession of those drugs was instantly punishable by death. So when you're sitting in a line of taxi cabs and some soldiers rush the car in front of you and pull a guy out and put a pistol to his head and pull the trigger, and his brains go all over, and he falls onto the ground, his body, with the syringe that he had, that stops your drug problem immediately. And I can tell you that ended the drug problem there immediately. If you went and said, hey, I'd like to have some drugs, people would run the other direction. Now, I am not advocating, for those of you that don't have critical thinking skills, I am not advocating having the army go around and shoot people in the head for being drug addicts. I'm not advocating that at all. I wish the Turks had developed a different program, but what I'm saying is in one day they fixed their drug addiction problem. Because if you needed an incentive to be sober, being shot in the head by a soldier was a good one. But instead of that, what if they said, we're going to encourage everybody to turn to God? I've seen God heal a bunch of people of drug addiction. I've seen God heal people of the desire to murder other humans, and having done much of it. I've seen God heal women of the spirit of prostitution that led them into that lifestyle. My family members who are missionaries have seen God's spirit take away the wicked spirit of homosexuality and lesbianism and heal people from that and let them become children of God. You see, God has the answer for all that. And so that's what we should pray. Give us gladness in proportion to our former misery and make our efforts successful. But there's a force in the world that controls most governments right now. Certainly it controls the government of the United States, and it's not just right now. When I was in Washington, there was a meme going around back then, and it was wonderful. You remember that scene in Star Wars when Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke and the robots go into Mos Eisley? They're getting ready to go in, and they're standing on a hill, and they're looking down at Mos Eisley, and Obi-Wan Kenobi says, that's Mos Eisley. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Well, there was a neat meme going around back in the 80s that had a picture of Washington, D.C., and it had Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke and the robots standing there and saying, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. That's true. Washington, D.C. is hell in many places. It's the most decadent, lascivious, horrific cesspool of nastiness you can imagine. And I'm not talking about crime. I'm talking about in places that are supposed to be wonderful, like the White House or Pennsylvania Avenue, or like the Congress, or many of the federal agencies. There are things that go on there. I wasn't even a believer yet, and it was so wicked, I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. Because there's stuff that goes on inside those places, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI. Man, you can't even imagine the wickedness that goes on in there. And you can probably imagine it, but think of the most decadent thing you hear coming out of Hollywood, and it's right there in Washington, D.C. too. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick story. So, after I get out of the military, I was still really young, figuring out what I was going to do. So I took a job as a doorman of one of the most prominent hotels in Washington, D.C. And we would have all sorts of politicians and movie stars and everybody else come in. Matter of fact, the Prime Minister of Japan stayed at our hotel. And it was a pretty fancy place. Anyway, I used to have members of the House and Senate. I had a podium outside underneath this incredibly giant, beautiful ornate awning that their limousines would come to. And I would open the door, and there were some who would get out and have on athletic gear, like they were going to go exercise. And they'd have their wallet on top of it and their room key, and they'd hand it to me. And they'd say, Jeff, my assistant is going to be here in just a few minutes. Would you make sure they get my room key? And I'd say, yes, sir. Because the policy at our hotel was, whatever our guests ask for, we're going to give it to them. I mean, barring, I don't know if there was, I wasn't going to do everything that people might ask for, but you'd be shocked. Anyway, so this member of our government, elected government, would give me their clothing, their wallet, and their room key. And I had a locked podium that was really beautiful. And I wore white gloves and mohair coat and all that. And I would put their stuff in my podium. And they would go in. And in about 10 minutes, another limousine would pull up. Or a car, a sedan, a town car or something. And I would open the door, and a very attractive young lady would get out. And she would say, hi, I'm the assistant to Senator so-and-so, or I'm the assistant to Congressman so-and-so. And I would say, uh-huh. I wouldn't say, uh-huh, but in my brain, I'm thinking, uh-huh. So I would say, yes, I'm to give you this. And I would go to my podium and unlock it, and I would give them the room key. And they would say, thank you. They would go in. And about 30 minutes later, the member of government would come back down and in their athletic gear and hand me a nice bill for a tip. And I would unlock my podium and hand them their clothing and their wallet and open the door for the limousine, and they would get back in and head out after their workout. And then about 10 minutes later, their assistant would come down, give me the room key, and I would call a car, and a car would come and take her back to where she was going. And this happened all the time. And I was thinking, that's bad enough. But there were some of these people in our elected government who, instead of me opening the door of their limo to get in to go back to the Capitol, their wife would drive up. I remember one senator had a wife with a poodle. She always had it in the passenger seat. And she would come back and she'd roll down the window, hey, Jeff. And I'd be, hey, ma'am, how are you? Oh, I'm good. And then he would come down in his little gym clothes, and I would open the door for him. And, sir, you have a wonderful day. Ma'am, you have a wonderful day. Thank you, Jeff. And then, he'd take the poodle and put it on his lap, and I'd shut the door, and they would drive off. And then 10 minutes later, his assistant would come down from the hotel room. That's the government you have. Now, not everybody. There's good people in government on both sides. There's not a lot, but there are good people in government. Far too few. They're the tiny minority, but there are some. So why is our government so wicked and corrupt? Now, and by the way, that story, if I told you some of the stuff that went on in the White House, you wouldn't believe it. Anyway, and I'm not just talking under Biden. I'm talking about many presidents. Not all, but many. So why is our government so corrupt? Because they don't do what Moses said. They don't look to God. They don't ask God to help us. They don't acknowledge that through all generations you have been our home. They don't believe in God. They may even give you lip service and say, I believe in God. You know what that's like? That's like me telling you I'm a vegetarian, and then I'm at the butcher shop buying, top sirloin steak. That means I'm full of baloney and I'm a liar. And all these people in power that are telling you they believe in God, but none of their actions show that. They think it's okay to kill children unborn. They think it's okay for criminals to do whatever they want and shouldn't be punished. They think that America is completely racist and everything that happens to people that are of color is because of people that look like me, whose ancestors weren't even from here. That's from the devil. That's because they're trying to wrestle against flesh and blood, and people of God don't do that. But they're lying, and that's why our government is full of liars, and so is most of the governments of the world are full of liars. But praise God, we have a mechanism here in America that they don't have in a lot of other places to fix that. That mechanism is voting. Now, be that as it may, generally the elections work. And that means generally, if a place like California keeps electing a guy like Gray Davis after they recalled him because he was so bad, then that means generally the people there want him to be in power. Because he's getting millions of votes. Now, whether he's buying those votes by promising stuff, that doesn't matter, but people are still voting for him. Right? I remember in Washington, D.C., when people voted for Marion Barry after he smoked crack with a hooker on TV. And that was I laughed because I was working there at the time. And I was like, man, in D.C., their standard for politicians is a crack smoking philanderer. And that's, hey. Anyway, I digress. So pray Psalm 90 today. Read Psalm 90. I'm sorry for squeaking. I've had kind of a nasal thing. But remember, God has been our home through all generations, and we should ask him to give us gladness in proportion to our former misery. If you don't know Jesus, man, you got to get on the Jesus bandwagon. Not just because I'm saying it. That doesn't mean anything. I'm just a guy. But because he's God. And he's coming back soon. I don't know when. But he ain't going to leave the earth the way it is. This wasn't how he intended it to be. And you got two choices. You can be on one side or the other. You don't want to be on the other. You want to be on his side. Right? The Bible says, kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. Get on his team, Team Jesus. Do it today. Don't wait. You never know how long you're going to be here. I'll just say that. God bless you. May you be blessed, and ask God to return your former misery to gladness in the same proportion. Bye.